Good day everyone, and welcome to the channel. It's Londononion here with a Back 4 Blood weapons review. And in this review, we're going to be looking at our second sniper rifle, the Phoenix 350. Now, as part of today's discussion, we're going to be including my proposed weapon-centered deck build following the review. Now, although the stats and specs of the weapon speak for themselves, I will be giving my evaluation on the weapon's capabilities in combat. This will involve tactics that suit the weapon's strengths, my conclusive opinion, and an overall score. Now, evaluation will take place on 4 main fronts: ammunition economy, crowd control, mutation deterrence, and pressure combat. Before we get started, it is important to note that a weapon's shortcomings can be supplemented with one's card selection, but evaluation will mainly be geared toward the weapon's base attributes. Additionally, one's character choice can make a weapon somewhat more forgiving, meanwhile difficulty selection can accentuate or soften the downsides. So starting off with the Phoenix's ammunition economy, which is essentially how long a weapon can practically last throughout a given level. The Phoenix is a bolt-action sniper rifle that inflicts extremely high damage. Since it is a bolt-action weapon with only 5 rounds per magazine, this naturally gives a significant boost to the economy of the weapon. Additionally, since it is a single-shot, non-spread weapon, the accuracy is 100%, meaning that ammo waste is mainly up to user error. However, it is worth mentioning that the iron sights is relatively difficult to work with, making each shot a forced effort and can contribute to user error, but I would consider this a nitpick. It is a sniper after all, and is consequently best used with optics. With incredibly high damage, each ridden, regardless of their ferocious or monstrous corruption cards, they will only require a single round on any part of their body. Lastly, the recoil is rather sharp, but as a bolt-action weapon, this is almost an irrelevant disadvantage. Moving on to crowd control, depending on one's corruption cards and main events in a given stage, crowd control will be more or less an important constituent in one's survival. Higher difficulties will likely create a greater need for effective crowd control. The Phoenix is a very rigid weapon to use. Despite its damage output, the bolt-action feature, low magazine capacity, and low mobility make this weapon almost impossible to use effectively against incoming crowds. The only positives the Phoenix has is its penetration. Each round can eliminate 3 and likely more ridden. The only issue, however, is that taking advantage of this requires ridden to be in filed or close-knit sequential formation. The only consistent way to create this is by bottlenecking crowds, which requires very specific circumstances that Back 4 Blood cannot consistently offer. The negatives become exacerbated while on the move, because this only demands a more efficient use of the weapon, and this is essentially abusive to the Phoenix. Attempting to use hipfire with the Phoenix is not impossible, but a complete squander beyond 6 meters. A supplementing secondary is virtually mandatory. Moving on to pressure combat, as I coined the term, this refers to how efficiently a weapon can eliminate targets in multiple areas, or how well a weapon can complement one's ability to engage and eliminate multiple scattered targets at varying ranges. Now, the Phoenix has limited ability to keep up with pressure combat. It is a bolt-action weapon, and the reload speed is no help either. The effective range and one-shot, one-kill or more reliability is also a benefit. But with enough pressure, the weapon is easily overwhelmed. Now, unless you are Shroud on a lethal dose of cocaine, attempting to keep up with a series of incoming ridden from varying ranges will be insanely difficult, and likely not worth one's time. In regards to dealing with mutations, the Phoenix is a mutation killer at any range, even without damage buffs. Aside from tall boys, all other mutations stumble regularly with each round. But even against tall boys, the Phoenix can put them down without having to reload. But even with reloading, this is a small price to pay for how effective this weapon is when thwarting mutations. Ferocious and monstrous cards can have an effect, but even with those in play, with the correct accuracy, most mutations will crumble with focused fire. Naturally, this is a fighting weapon, kiting only under particular circumstances of being caught off guard. But this is a slow-paced weapon, which demands proactivity. Moving on to the scoring, The weapon's ammo economy is exemplary. It demands controlled fire, has reliable shot-to-kill / shot-to-multi-kill capability, has a low magazine size, and essentially unlimited effective range. So I give it a deserving 5 out of 5. Crowd control is the Phoenix's kryptonite. The demand on precision, its bolt-action feature, low magazine capacity, and hip-fire reliability, or lack thereof, creates a nice, hot, insanely difficult pie. The only silver lining is its penetration and damage, so I give it a 1 out of 5. Pressure combat and mutation deterrence is an area of mixed performance. The Phoenix has limited ability to deal with pressure combat, but even moderate pressure will force backpedaling or full-on retreat. Mutation deterrence, however, is where the Phoenix is almost unparalleled. Its natural stumbling capability, high damage, and limitless range make it an ideal niche weapon for large threats without stressing the weapon. So I give it a 7 out of 10. Overall, that puts the weapon at a 13 out of 20. Now that concludes the review, but we will now transition into our deck build for this weapon. Now generally I would say that there are two aspects of building a weapon / weapon class specific deck. There is the more strength-based build, and the compensatory / balancing build. A third option would naturally be a hybrid, which is probably the most reasonable, but every weapon is different and has its own strengths and areas of need, to varying degrees. Now with this in mind, on a smaller scale, I will categorize potential card selections into 4 designations: related, compensatory, synergistic, and preferential. Although Back for Blood already has its own designations for cards, I prefer to use my own. And before we get started, it is important to note that there are 1,000 ways to build a deck. The most I can do is showcase how I prefer to optimize this weapon's performance. So starting off with the related cards. Related cards are the ones that directly impact / buff the attributes or effects of a given weapon / weapon class. The cards in this category are Stock Pouch, Controlled Movement, and Trigger Control. Stock Pouch grants a 30% increase to ammo capacity and increases damage by 10%. Controlled Movement grants a 40% increase in movement speed while aiming down one's sights. And Trigger Control grants a 25% increase in accuracy. Stock Pouch I apply without question. More ammo and damage will only make the Phoenix more dangerous in its niche. Controlled movement is a need since the mobility of the weapon is considerably low compared to most weapons. As for trigger control, the only benefit this will have for the Phoenix is tightening the crosshairs, but I wouldn't consider this a worthwhile investment as it will only help hipfire accuracy, so I choose to leave trigger control out. Now moving on to the compensatory cards. Compensatory cards are meant to counteract the weapon's main weaknesses or balance out its areas of need. In the Phoenix's case, its main areas of need, according to the stats, are handling, otherwise known as recoil control and swap speed, and mobility. Since this is a bolt-action weapon, recoil control does not seem particularly important. Swap speed is noticeable when compared with other weapons, but not to the point that I would prefer to target it. Lastly, mobility is already handled with controlled movement in our related cards. Now, this is not to say that I don't have any compensatory cards. Because of how rigid the weapon is, reload speed, which also enhances the bolt action animation, can help loosen it, so to speak. Consequently, I choose to employ reload drills and cold brew coffee. Lastly, I also choose to employ mag carrier. Reload drills grants a 20% increase in reload speed, and cold brew coffee grants a 15% increase in reload speed, 25% in aim speed, 25% in weapon swap speed, and 25% in use speed. Now, my reasoning for choosing cold brew is not only for the reload speed, but also the swap speed. Not to mention, the other features can be helpful. But as for swap speed, this helps, but the reasoning behind it will make sense as we discuss further. As for mag carrier, this grants a 30% increase in ammo capacity and a 10% increase in damage for pistols and SMGs. As stated during our review, having an effective secondary will likely be a requirement to supplement the Phoenix. However, I will consider this an optional / circumstantial card. Again, this will make sense further in our discussion. Moving on to the Synergistic Cards. These are cards that have impacts to increase areas of strength or work to optimize the effects of other cards or one's choice of character. Now, the cards I chose were Confident Killer, Ridden Slayer, March for Death, Silver Bullets, Patient Hunter, and Knowledge is Power. Confident Killer grants a 1% increase in damage for every mutation killed, and stacks up to 15% for the duration of a given level. Ridden Slayer grants a 20% increase in weak spot damage. March for Death increases damage by 10% to pinged enemies. Silver Bullets grants a 10% increase in bullet damage and 15% effective bullet range. Knowledge is Power grants a 10% increase in weak spot damage, and Patient Hunter increases damage by 10% every 0.75 seconds one is aiming down their sights, and this stacks 3 times. Theoretically, all of these added up can create a 65% increase in damage output, not including the 30% weak spot damage. Our last area of card selection is the Preferential Cards. These are cards that are completely unrelated to the weapon and its strengths / weaknesses, but are still a useful perk, and this is where the most nuance can take place. Given that we have 4 slots left, I choose to give it to Grenade Pouch, Body Armor, Durable, and Combat Knife. Grenade Pouch grants an extra offensive throwable. Durable increases trauma resistance by 15% and health by 5 units. Body Armor increases trauma resistance by 25% but reduces ammo capacity by 15%, and Combat Knife turns one's bash into a tack knife. Now, as I said, this is where the most nuance can take place. Combat Knife is an option. An alternative, however, could be 2 is 1 and 1 is none. This card allows one to equip 2 primary weapons, though it comes with an ammo swap penalty of 25%. As we had discussed in our review, an effective secondary is necessary, and with this card, one can equip any weapon of their choice to accompany the Phoenix and allow one to be more combatively balanced. Depending on one's choice of a secondary primary weapon, they may or may not need Mag Carrier, which benefits pistols and SMGs, as we discussed with our Compensatory Cards. And the swap speed is perfectly compensated by cold brew coffee. So the option is there, but I personally choose to remain with an effective pistol, particularly the 357 Magnum, and the Combat Knife. From a team-based perspective, having 2 primaries can turn one into an ammo sink. With the Magnum, less ammo is required per target, and I consider it an easy weapon to use while maintaining decent mobility. As for the other cards, I like to have more than one throwable, and because we're working with the Phoenix rifle, it is a niche weapon and may require extra supplementation when dealing with crowds. As an additional supplement, I take on Trauma Defense as a measure for survivability. Now, our last area of discussion is the character choice. Just like our other sniper rifles, it primarily fits with Walker and Jim, but I will also include Hoffman into this build. However, he will be given a slightly different deck build. For Jim and Walker, I would equip the Combat Knife and Mag Carrier. Hoffman, on the other hand, would have 2 primaries in any related or ammo-centered card for the given secondary. Hoffman is able to have an extra offensive throwable slot. He also is able to find extra ammo. Additionally, he grants a 10% increase in ammo capacity. But as I said, guys, there's 1,000 ways to build a weapon-centered deck. These were just my preferences. Otherwise, though, that concludes the build. Thank you guys for joining me on this one, and in our next video, we'll be reviewing the RPK LMG, and we'll also discuss my preferred deck build for said weapon. It's been Londononion, and I will see you guys next time.